Hey guys, welcome to the DarshanTalks recording and podcast. On this podcast, we discuss life science, legal, and regulatory issues, especially in the context of medical affairs, clinical research, and promotional compliance. If you like these videos and podcasts, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You know you want to. This video and podcast is brought to you by the Kulkarni Law Firm. Reach out to the Kulkarni Law Firm for advice on PRC review, MRC review, developing SOPs, training, audit compliance, and more. Reach out to Darshan at kulkarnilawfirm.com or call me at 302-252-6959. Or you can just visit our website at DarshanTalks.com or visit the law firm website at kulkarnilawfirm.com. That's KULKARNI lawfirm.com. Hey guys, welcome. I'm excited. I get to have Brad Hightower on the podcast again. It's really exciting because we've already done one component of this interview. We spoke a little bit about the 5 elements to improve site-sponsor relationships and result in a more productive clinical trial as we continue. I do want to point out that we've spoken about 2 of them already. The first one is feasibility. The second one is the budget. I'll put links in there for people to access this. But there are 3 more. We're going to talk about site initiation visits. We're going to talk about protocol support, and we're going to talk about communications. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our speaker. So, Brad, do you want to talk a little bit about who you are, why you're ideally suited to have this conversation?
Yeah, thanks. So I've been, working at the site level for almost 15 years now. Now operating my own site network / integrated research organization, whatever you want to call it, sort of a nice smattering of different site models. So we work with a lot of different physicians and groups in different capacities, but really provide end-to-end research infrastructure for them and act as their site essentially. So as you can imagine, we've dealt with at this point, hundreds of studies across different sponsors, CROs, therapeutic areas. So really had the opportunity to have a lot of sort of diverse experience across the site space. And
again, that's hightowerclinical.com if they want to access that information. You also do a podcast, Note to File, which is very popular. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. I think having conversations just like these, like you have, we need more of that, especially at the site level. So Note to File has been sort of a hope to move in that direction, having more open, transparent conversations, and really just trying to keep a site lens and perspective. There's a good deal of vendor and sponsor talk out there, I think, but I think the sites could be a little bit better represented. So that's kind of the overview there. Again, sort of still keeping a broader industry focus, but having the lens of the site.
And again, I'll try to put a link to Note to File in the series as well, so people can go to it, access it, and subscribe. I also want to make a quick mention of something you recently started, which I saw you and I want to say Dan do together, Dan Safera, which was you guys did a LinkedIn Live, and you guys were talking. Is that accurate? Did I misunderstand?
Yeah, no, that was it. I think maybe, I'm experimenting right now. I'm thinking about just sort of making this an extension of my podcast, but doing live sessions. I think podcasting is great. Sometimes I think a lot of times I think it's better to have even more diversity of opinion and true real-time engagement, So I'm hoping that picks up and, remains popular, because I think there's just so much to consider in these conversations. And sometimes it's hard to do with just 2 or 3 people at a time. So if you can really get the community engaged, I think we can go even, further and quicker towards making some significant changes within the industry. So yeah, that's kind of the new project right now.
It's very cool. So going back to the original project, which was actually improve, and all of this is with the perspective of improving sponsor site relationships so that it results in better communication and a more productive clinical research for patients in the end. So we spoke a little bit about feasibility. We said that analysis more data needs to be available, more transparency needs to be present so that you can actually have better feasibility. We then spoke a little bit about the budget. and we spoke a little bit about how the budget doesn't always reflect the actual work being done. And we spoke about a few different types of it. For example, screen fails were an issue we got into. You then brought up site initiation visits. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and in some ways, I think it suffers from a lot of the same issues that the feasibility process does. It's a really wasted opportunity. Oftentimes, a site initiation visit consists of a CRA who doesn't really know the protocol very well, and that's not a knock against them. They have very difficult jobs, and I sympathize with them to a great deal. But they come in with very little knowledge of the protocol. And in fact, if the study's starting, there's maybe not much opportunity for them to know much about it. But they're essentially reading a slide deck to you, word by word. Oftentimes, much slower than you could read it aloud yourself. And, you can tell that, they aren't familiar with the material, as they will, struggle with some of the words and medication names, which, again, perfectly understandable. But again, we're just sort of ticking a box, I feel like, instead of having an engaging interaction, right? Because I can read that stuff. That's not an issue.
Right.
That's not really the problem. What I would love to see is, again, something that's more interactive and engaging. Why aren't we, potentially walking through what a mock patient looks like? What does the screening visit actually look like? Let's break it down very granularly so that there's no surprises when those visits happen. Because what does tend to happen is you may not get your activation for a week or two. You get it, you bring a patient in, and you're like, okay, well, I've forgotten everything that lady read to me 2 weeks ago. I'm going to go see if I can find the SIV slides and go through them. But again, you're still sort of oftentimes fumbling around in the dark to know which system do I go to first. Do I have all my source prepared and ready? Again, what does the workflow of this visit look like and make sense? And that kind of stuff is sort of, again, not real front and center during an SIV. And I think that's the perfect time to do it, right? We should be tying those pieces together so that when those visits happen, nothing is a surprise, right? And I still feel like that's the case. Always, the first visit is always like a roll of the dice. Like, how right are we going to get it? What are we going to have to change based off of the mistakes we made on this first visit? And that just shouldn't be the case, with how quickly we rush through this process. We're not taking advantage of really important opportunities to better streamline the way we're doing things so that the trial can succeed.
So let me ask you this question. In your experience, who is actually doing, at the site level, who's actually doing the research? Is it the PI, or is it the nurse, or is it, say, the medical assistant? Like, who's helping with that process?
It can depend. It's generally, the way I will define it is, I always have 2 study coordinators. Now, whether they are nurses or MAs or whatever their background is sort of, may depend on the complexity or needs of the trial. If it's an infusion trial, probably going to want to have a nurse on there. And if it's a simple outpatient drug trial, maybe we don't need a nursing staff to be part of that. But, the way an SIV works is the majority of the time is spent with the study coordinators. I attend these as well, just because I can help provide some other, additional oversight and, kind of help manage processes. But, the PI pops in. Oftentimes the PI is like, on their phone. So, yep, I'm paying attention. I understand that. Okay, great. Not always the case, but the CRAs are sensitive to the PI's time because they're treating patients, So ultimately, though, the PI understands what they need to understand, but the majority of the work and the information is being imparted to the research coordinator, or assistant, I guess, depending on what your structure is. But, the way I view it, everyone is sort of a study coordinator in that role. And
the reason I'm asking this question is, in my experience, the vast majority of CRAs are very good at having a sense of what to focus on, and they're very detail oriented, but they may not actually be clinicians. So my question would be, if that's true, are they in the best position to be actually doing an SIV in the first place, according to your definition of what an SIV should include?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I don't know if it needs to rise to that level necessarily. I really just think, because again, the doctors, you're basically telling the doctor what he already does every day. Like when you're going through, mechanisms of action, and the doctors know that stuff. So I feel like there's oftentimes not a lot to be said there. If the doctors have a question, that can be escalated. That's not necessarily an issue, but I think the focus needs to really be on like the logistics of how these things are being done, and to sort of defend or be on the side of the sponsor, I would consider like challenging the site a little bit more, because again, we kind of play this game. How many patients do you have? 1,000. Okay. How many can you enroll every month? 5. Okay. Put it down on the piece of paper and submit it. But we're not like together having the conversation, and I think it would be instructive for sites too. I mean, we do already do this, but saying like, okay, let's walk through the journey of where these patients are. Where could they be? Yeah. What are some other potential things that we are overlooking in terms of, because again, the patients may exist, but they may be distributed across a system in a way that makes it challenging to reach those patients. And that's something that, again, you could save yourself a lot of time and trouble if you went to really did some sort of deeper due diligence. And again, I think it would behoove the sponsors to challenge the sites in that regard. Now, I understand that's the responsibility of the site, but again, I'm talking about ways to open up and work more collaboratively, and not just say like, here's your part, you take care of it, we did our part. Let's all work together so that we can all succeed.
So what I'm wondering is this where technology comes more into play? And last time we landed up speaking about blockchain, but today we're going to talk a little bit maybe about telemedicine and talk a little bit more about just video, which, it's breakthrough technology, talk about video. But I'm just wondering whether some of this stuff should just be recorded and available on a controlled website where you can access it and you're not asking someone to perform or mime something that maybe can be performed easily. I will argue, though, that while that makes a lot of sense and seems so obvious, from a FDA perspective, one of the things you have to make sure is that it got done. And when I talk to sites and I speak to sponsors, one of the big issues you have is the site will say, I'm so busy, I haven't gotten to it yet. So the only way you can make things happen is by sending someone to the site and say, okay, we're all going to sit down, we're going to do this.
Right.
So things that should take 15 minutes and no one's in the room except you land up taking 2 travel days, making an appointment, all that good stuff. So should this be a burden that the sponsor takes on, or should this be a burden that the site needs to own and go, okay, we're screwing this up, we're prolonging this? How do you sort of bring those two pieces together?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think the responsibility lies on both parties, and I think it also benefits both parties to help meet in the middle when it comes to that. Yeah. So I think very likely you could break out some of these things that could be done and stored remotely where you can view them at any time, but at the same time, come on site, but be more focused on, some specifics that are going to be more useful. But then again, like at the end of the day, you've got a resource to go back to. And again, I just don't see that very well organized on the sponsor side, which, again, to your point, like who's, it's okay, well, you're the site. So this is what we're paying you for. This is your job. So you figure it out. But again, I feel like with maybe even minimal investment, you could potentially save yourself a ton of time and trouble by, just tying together some of those loose ends for sites to make it just a little bit more focused.
So the other question I have is, do you think maybe a type of escalation mechanism for SIV and post SIV communications would make sense? And I know we're going to have communications as our last sort of catch-all piece, but maybe it makes sense to have someone to talk to about what the pure logistics of it, and maybe that's just someone who happens to be a medical assistant, or it could be a nurse. But maybe you actually have a clinical question and you need to talk to the medical director of the company, of the sponsor. And there's a way to reach that person through whether you're talking about Siri, whether you're talking about picking up the phone and just talking to someone, or maybe it's something else altogether, or maybe it's even email. Do you feel like that would enhance the SIV experience to know that this is not my one chance to get everything done? This is the first of many more opportunities.
Yeah, and so this is going to kind of dovetail and ebb and weave into both ongoing protocol support and communication too. It all ties together very nicely, because this is something I've become more of a proponent of, is having some kind of subject matter expert that's not your CRA, that you can get in touch with. Because again, I love CRAs, I respect them, but they are oftentimes difficult to get a hold of because of their obligations to other sites. They're traveling. Sometimes they just don't know. They haven't maybe viewed a protocol through the lens of the question that you're asking. So to have somebody available, and for it to be clear who that is, because there's been times where I've worked halfway through a study and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've been your person the whole time." And I'm like, "Well, hell, I didn't know that. I didn't know there was another person on the other side who I could have been potentially, dealing with." I mean, that would be incredibly smart, and again, could avoid a lot of sort of last minute disasters, that like to crop up, when you're got a patient in clinic and something's not working right, and you need someone now. I think that could certainly keep the wheels greased a whole lot better.
Do you worry that if we did what you and I just proposed, this idea of having this escalation mechanism and having multiple opportunities for communication, there are multiple risks that get introduced? Like, I'm thinking specifically about something like HIPAA, where as the site, all you're doing is dealing with patients. All you're doing is, these are the people I'm don't want to use the word treating, but working with. And when you call up, it may not be you, Brad, or it might be someone else who just picks up the phone and says, "Yeah, Joan Smith came in today to get treated, and we gave blah, 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 and it's doing blah. That seems odd." What you've just done is broken the blinding. You've violated HIPAA, and the sponsor just going, "Could we not have just said that?"
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could understand that being a real concern. I mean, I think there's still smart ways to do it, by which, we always try to refer to subjects by their subject number, refer to the IP as IP, not one drug or the other drug. I mean, I think you could still follow some basic best practices to prevent, any sort of HIPAA violation or otherwise divulging any PHI. But I to your point, I could understand that being a liability that a sponsor wouldn't necessarily want to take on any more than they have to.
Right. Okay. So that would be the SIV. The next thing you were talking about is, and we've already introduced the concept of protocol support. So what did you have in mind there?
So, and even beyond protocol support, and I guess maybe again, I probably touched on some of these things, like having something as simple as, a basic manual of operations to sort of, again, give me some process at the site level. And I've seen this with trials, and it's very successful. I don't have to guess what the next step is. That's sort of all weaved together in some sort of document, or mostly in a document, but also, explaining how the different vendor sites fit together, because some communicate with each other, some don't. Oftentimes, again, you don't know where do I go to get the subject number, or do I start with the screening number and later switch to a randomization number? And when you're dealing with, double-digit number of studies, that can be very challenging to manage as a study coordinator. So something as basic as that. And then something I think, again, is super underutilized or oftentimes not utilized well are things like ongoing study newsletters. Again, I don't know why you wouldn't do it for every study and, actually collect best practices from your sites and share them. I mean, there's so much these sites could be learning from each other. And the sponsor could be a very easy conduit. I mean, they've got people at all of these sites. Again, the studies in which there's been some attention to that seem to have succeed at a better rate because, again, you're sort of crowdsourcing what works best, and everyone's able to utilize and tap into that, those potential processes. Again, doesn't work 100% of the time, but it's, I think, a real shame to miss that opportunity. And again, something that I would think would take very little investment from the sponsor side.
No, I love these ideas. I'm just sort of thinking, and I feel a little bit bad because I represent sponsors, I represent sites, I represent CROs and SMOs. So I've had experience with each of these, but I'm going to now throw CROs under the bus a little bit in this context, but not quite. So what you're talking about, whether you're talking about the basic manual of operations or you're talking about study newsletters, in both scenarios, I think they sound great. But I can just imagine that bid defense for the CRO who's going in and saying, you know what we do is we really enable communications with the site, and we will monitor the site to make sure that it gets that the study gets done. And as part of that, we're going to charge you an extra, I'm making up numbers here, $30,000 for newsletters and an extra $100,000 to develop a basic manual of operations to compile all this stuff. I can imagine the sponsor going, nope, I'm not paying for that. I'm not paying an extra $150,000 for you to essentially send out that kind of money, because in the end, you're going up against other people, and the rest of them saying we don't include that. Right. So the question then becomes, how do you pitch that in a way where you can show the value? Like if sites came to the sponsor and said, we insist on this, maybe there's a conversation. If sponsors had really great experience with that already, I can see that adding a ton of value. But we're in that no man's land, if you will, where sponsors have not seen the value yet. Sites are not crawling and sort of saying, I want this. And the CR is going, if I offer this, I'm going to just be a higher budget number. And that doesn't help anyone. So
yeah, no, that's yeah. No, that's a good, and again, a consideration we don't often take from the side because, again, we're just like, where's all this stuff, and not really thinking about the downstream. Like, well, that costs money, and it's someone wants to win a bid, they want to come in under the other people, so they're trying to stay lean, but get things accomplished. I mean, to your point, I think it'd be great to see sites insist on it. I know that, like, either way, I'm asking my CRA when they come in the door, hey, how's the study going? How are other sites doing? Is there anything we can learn that you're seeing other sites do? And it becomes sort of an informal thing that's already happening. And to your point too, I think maybe there's a way to quantify the benefit that you get from that. I don't know how to do a study that says studies with well-designed newsletters that capture best practices, enroll and retain patients at a higher rate, which saves money at the end of the day. Now, right. That's certainly just a hypothesis at this point, but it'd be great to see somebody, be able to put some data behind that.
I mean, I agree with you 100%. I'm wondering whether, if I was the CRO and the sponsor said, what additional tools can you give me? The thing I would start thinking about is I can give you, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, a dashboard that tells you how your sites are working. This will take a shit ton of time, and I think that's a technical word, but we can explain that later on. This will take a shit ton of time and money to do this. But the fact is that you will know at any given time how your studies are doing. And I can see a sponsor willing to pay for that over something that they will never see, and the value in it at this moment is amorphous at best. because they will never know
Yeah.
whether the study went better. They will only know if the study is sort of existing.
Yeah, fair. I guess it's hard to sort of have a control arm in those instances, because you can't say, hey, we finished 3 months faster than we would have otherwise, because you just can't know that that's the case. But again, I've seen it be done, at different scale. Small biotech company comes in, take your best practices, take them from all the sites, put something together, and you'll see enrollment jump after that. I mean, again, that's anecdotal, of course, but I can't imagine, if it's done well, there not being some great value there, so yeah.
Let me rephrase this. I do a weekly newsletter, and I send that to anyone who signed up on my newsletter. And if you want to go to it, you can go to DarshanTalks.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm putting this out to all the people who are listening in, all the people who Brad listens to. You send me your tips, I will put them in the newsletter so that everyone can benefit from it.
Right.
I get nothing out of it. It just gets to be a thing that people get value out of. So that's my offer to the world. And we can have discussions on those. And Brad has a podcast where he can have that conversation. I have a podcast, and we have live streams and all those good things put together. So that's just an offer I'm throwing out because it seems easy enough. What do you think about that? Is that still not quite what you had in mind?
No, I think there's some interesting things here. And this is where, I don't think I've really plugged this here, but, I started a forum. It's called Clinical Trial Confidential. But even having like a simple forum that enables sites to talk, let sites talk to each other about it. Maybe the sponsor doesn't even have to be the one sort of managing it. Just instead providing, look, you can get a WordPress website with a forum on it for next to $0. So, a place where, again, sites can go, if they're on the study, and they can talk to each other to say, hey, you know what? Visit 2, there's a PK sample at this time, and we're having trouble timing all this out. What are you guys doing? Again, very practical information that can be shared it doesn't have to be a formalized newsletter. I think there's a lot of different mediums by which that could take place.
So, but let's say we did exactly what you're suggesting, Brad. In that scenario, aren't you worried as a sponsor that is also a forum at which people can, an uncontrolled forum, where people can start either bad-mouthing your study or having conversations that you really just wait, because you start having issues with unblinding and all those types of issues which you can't control, and you really don't want them speaking to each other. The same reason you don't want patients speaking to each other. How do you address those concerns?
Yeah, I suppose, you could moderate the forum just to keep some of that stuff out. But look, to some degree, for better or worse, like, people are going to be talking shit about your study if it's bad. Wouldn't you rather know it and be able to maybe learn from and address those issues? Right now. What's that?
I believe it's called doximity, where people talk shit about your product for the most part.
Right. Yeah. Hell, I do it on LinkedIn. So, it's the thing is, it'll get out there. So, to that, I would say embrace it and learn from it and just accept that it's happening anyway. Now, I do understand there are things you wouldn't want sites divulging to each other that could be problematic, in which case, again, you could moderate the forum, which you could hire one person to click a button, after reviewing that it's okay. But yes, I do see, this is where I love these conversations with you, because you have a much more, you think about it like an attorney would. And, I'm like, fuck it, just do it. Let's just start doing stuff.
And that's why you need that balance, right? I'm just going pause, and you're just going, do it.
Right.
I'm also saying do it as often as I'm saying pause. Hopefully I'm saying pause, and here's how you rethink this thing through. But okay, so last one is communication. It's the catch-all bucket. I theoretically, I would say that if you ignore everything so far and you just want to take away what this entire series of 2 podcasts has been about, it all falls under communication. So talk to me about what you had in mind.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've touched on it all throughout the different aspects we've already talked about. But I think there's a balance for sponsors and sites, right? Like, if you are a site, you don't want to be bombarded daily by your sponsor, but you also don't want to be ignored and not hear anything for 3 months at a time. I think there's a balance that needs to be struck, and I'll be really honest, I don't know how to like scientifically quantify what that number is or that frequency is, but I also think it would be, behoove them.
It's not length of study divided by 2 multiplied by 17.
Right. Well, and I think you could also potentially, it would behoove everyone to have a centralized place rather than, I mean, I think I have, 500 emails in my inbox, and that's like a pretty good day right now. So if there were a centralized portal in which you could, view actually relevant study communication versus, stuff that's maybe not as relevant, that could go a long ways too. Just keeping everything organized and tightened up, because stuff gets lost in email. It gets sent to the wrong person. I've gotten emails that are sent to doctors who have the same name as my doctor but work for a different institution. I've been wrapped up in various email chains I definitely should not have been. So again, if maybe there were a portal to keep that sort of cleaned up, again, that would make both sides' life a little bit easier.
So this is gonna sound weird because I really don't use this forum to do this, but I'm coming up with a product called Ceres, which is exactly addressing that problem, which is a centralized location for only the communications you want to go to the right person to go to the right person. So it doesn't get caught up in the 19,000 emails we're all getting every single day. But I was really hoping not to be pitching things this second. But you know what? But no. So that was the big piece, which is there needs to be some level of communication, and that communication can come at a regular cadence. Is cadence important to you in terms of communication? Like, do you want to go, we're going to get an email every 2 weeks, whether or not you have something to say, that email will come. So I know there's a conversation that's going to be had. Or is it more about talk to me when you need to talk to me and no time, like at no other time?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be really honest. I probably will bitch about either one, but truthfully, I would rather see a regular cadence and it be, probably no more than 2 weeks. And it could, maybe if it's the same, let's address this and this on an ongoing basis, but maybe not every 3 days. I don't want somebody saying, where's your screening logs? Where's your screening logs every 3 days? Give me a couple of weeks. Let's also look more holistically, at the study. Again, maybe this is where a newsletter makes sense to go on a regular basis. So I would probably prefer that. And I also think that those studies are likely to succeed more. I mean, we had a study where I didn't hear from a monitor for 8 months. The original monitor never actually got us all the access to systems we needed. So of course we did nothing. And then when they come to us and say, why aren't you doing anything? I mean, it's too late. By then it's already, it's basically almost too late. We're too late in the game to get going. So if we had a regular cadence, I think it would have gotten more attention.
So you use the word communication, which is kind of amorphous. What does communication mean? I mean, obviously, we just spoke about email. We spoke about Ceres. But are we talking about things like text? Are we talking about things like, I don't know, pick up the phone call, talk to me? Like, what does communication mean? Is it, everyone talks in the advertising space, everyone talks about an omni-channel strategy. Is that what you want?
That's tough, and I don't know if I have a good answer, because I have CRAs that text me when they need something. I have CRAs who email. I have CRAs who call. Look, I'm sort of in that, like, I guess I'm like an old millennial, but like, I don't like to pick up the phone. I just don't like to. I'll answer an email, I'll answer a text, but if you call me and I don't know you, or I don't know the number, I'm just very unlikely to pick up the phone at all. So maybe it is omni-channel, and maybe it provides some optionality for, look, we get contact sheets that ask for fax numbers still to this day. So why can't we pick like which level or which method of communication works best for us? I mean, that's oftentimes a question for, any other customer service or commercial service you sign up for. Like, how do you want to be communicated with?
Interesting. So usually when they use the word omnichannel, they use that to mean multiple ways, not necessarily pick one way. When you used it, you actually said, let me pick the way. Is that important from a communication standpoint? Like, stick to one lane so I can find all my messages in one place. Like, do you want to create a Slack group and just go, everything is in that Slack group? Or is it about urgent emails I want through WhatsApp, but I want the, for record keeping, I want everything through Slack? Like, what is sort of ideal in your head?
Yeah, that's actually, and again, that is challenging for me. I think one platform is best. I mean, I get the concept of omni-channel, all things, but I still, and maybe that's still there, but you sort of can opt in or out depending on what your preference is. But yeah, I would love to just have one channel. Slack is another great example of where I think you could open a Slack channel, let your coordinators in, let them talk. They'll figure shit out amongst themselves, and I think your study will be the better for it. Now, yes, maybe that's going to require some moderation on part of the sponsor to make sure that.
Can you moderate Slack? Is that a thing?
I'm pretty sure you can. I think you can.
I've never seen it. I use Slack. I've never tried to moderate someone's conversation, so no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't either, but I have. I'm pretty sure you could. But yeah. Anyways, no, that's actually fair because I think, look, an email might get ignored. A text may not, but again, go ask all my coordinators. They all have different preferences, and they all have different ways that they'd prefer to do it. So I think that could be important. It's something I've never seen done, in a study before.
So I was having this conversation with a large sponsor last week, and during that conversation, we were talking. He came to me going, "Oh, you seem to know a lot about clinical research and advertising. I'm coming from the advertising world. I want to do more. I want to fix clinical research." And I was like, hold on. You want to fix clinical research? This is going to be awesome because let's have this conversation. And he was really, really nice. I want to lead from that part of it.
Sure.
He was coming from a place of, this must be simple. It's just people haven't gotten around to focusing on it. I'm going, it's not simple. And let's have that conversation. But one of the things I could totally see someone like him to be very skilled at is this omni-channel strategy to build these communications. And he was coming at it from the informed consent. How do you improve informed consent standpoint? Was what he thought was the low-hanging fruit. And after this conversation, I'm going, forget informed consent. You're never going to be able to fix that problem. It just takes too much effort. Communications with the site is the problem you want to fix. And you have sales experience or marketing experience. Bring that to the table, and you have something of significant value to add. I'm just sort of bringing those thoughts together.
No, and again, I think it could really change. It could change the efficiency of how sites work for sure. Because even now, if I think about, I've got a CRA communicating. They may have an eTMF person like under them, sort of, that's also communicating and asking me for documents. And then there may be broader emails saying, "There's a protocol amendment coming. Here's the draft." Well, okay. Well, maybe I don't care about the draft quite yet, but then here's the final. Okay. Well, the final's here, but it's not ready yet. You got to wait for the IRB to approve it. So, and then having to sort of track and manage and weave all those things together along with 1,000 other emails is just it's a losing proposition,
But let's take that for a second. What I was thinking about the second was such a US centric viewpoint. You and I were talking about, what, all we have to do is figure out text and email and Slack, because we're really cool like that, and maybe add in I think that was pretty much it. Maybe voicemails. But I'm now going, you're doing a multi-center, multinational study. Suddenly you're adding in WeChat, and you're adding in WhatsApp, and you're adding like different countries' favorite things. At a certain point, when you start talking multi-channel, omni-channel, are you now shifting that entire burden onto the sponsor, where they're now suddenly responsible for this omni-channel marketing strategy to clinical trial sites to basically do their job?
Yeah, I mean that's a fair question, and as you've done throughout this conversation, really opened the perspective to because we make it sound so simple, but as you really start to consider all the other downstream things and upstream things, you're like, oh, well, shit. Now that's now that's almost a whole separate company. That's not just a CRO with a project. That's now your 300th DCT vendor, right? Like that's
right.
So it's a fair question, and again, I certainly I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but you're probably right. That is probably much more of a tall order than I'm making it out to be.
So before we get going, I'm going to do a quick summary. There were 5 issues we got into: feasibility, budget, SIV, protocol support, and communication. We talked about the ups and downs, the value associated with it. We talked about all these different tools that could be great from a site perspective, whether we're talking about using video, we're talking about getting a basic manual of operations, study newsletters where you share best practices, having a regular cadence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We also, for example, spoke about Clinical Trial Confidential, which could be a really great place to engage people. We spoke about Ceres as well. And when we did all of that, we spoke about just having a regular cadence. And to that end, I'm hoping I can get Brad onto a regular cadence to actually come back here often to have this conversation or similar conversations. But let's keep going. Before we finish up, how can people reach you?
LinkedIn is probably the preferred way, and really sort of my, center of my universe. So all the stuff I do that spins off is all going to be on my LinkedIn profile, which Darshan is so gracefully thrown up on the screen there.
Perfect. And just to be clear, because he's being very modest, you can also reach him via email at brad@hightowerclinical. And if you just want to hear one-way musings, you can actually go to notetofilepodcast.com and sign up there. And you can always find me on Darshan well, you know what? Here's the video. These conversations are not intended to be legal, regulatory, or clinical advice and may not be right for you. These conversations are intended for educational purposes only. Conversations on this forum do not create an attorney-client relationship.